Hello everybody and welcome back to our temporary studio in the captain's quarters. You know, we've been going through our viewer mail, and while many of you think the new maritime theme set is great, some of you most certainly do not. Oof. I told you that joke stunk.
Thanks for trying it.
And since I did, could we maybe keep the interruptions to a minimum?
Okay.
Speaking of half-assed efforts, the president is trying to convince Americans he suddenly cares about the pandemic he's been ignoring for months, as he also threatens to send more secret police to cities across the country. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. Donald Trump is trailing Joe Biden by as much as 15 points in the latest polls. He's as unpopular as any president in modern history, and he's facing a larger deficit than any incumbent has ever overcome at this point in the campaign. But as we all know, Donald Trump is a master tactician and a marketing genius. It was only a matter of time before he cooked up a foolproof plan to win back those voters. And on Tuesday, with the nation's eyes upon him at a televised press briefing, he finally deployed his latest masterstroke.
President Trump was asked late today about Jeffrey Epstein's alleged co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell. She pleaded not guilty to sex trafficking charges last week, one of her alleged victims describing her as a predator and monster. The president today saying he hasn't followed her case, that they've met numerous times, and that he wishes her well.
I just wish her well, frankly. I've met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, and I guess they lived in Palm Beach, but I wish her well.
Checkmate Joe Biden. Just like the Trump team drew it up on the chalkboard, in front of millions of Americans, the president publicly sent well wishes to an alleged sex trafficker while reminding everyone he's been friends with her for years. I mean, you just can't teach that kind of political talent. Now all Trump has to do is sit back and watch the votes roll in. Now, I know you Monday morning quarterbacks out there might think that publicly sending well wishes to Jeffrey Epstein's wing woman 100 days before a presidential election is, shall we say, a misstep. But you see, Trump is always 10 steps ahead. When you go left, he goes right. When you zig, he says nice things about someone who was recently apprehended by federal agents while hiding out in a remote compound. Because if there is one thing that Trump's base cares most about, it's a woman whose first name sounds like a French perfume for someone who is keeping a secret. Ghislaine. Shh. And again, one day we will get a second close-up camera for right over there. My favorite thing about this is imagining the staff reaction. They only called this press conference to try to improve Trump's poll numbers. You know they must have tried so hard to keep him on script. Mr. President, we just need you to focus on the facts of the coronavirus and only the facts. So just, stick to the script. Got it. All you have to do is sound presidential and the media will eat it up. Don't worry, I will let you down. Just one question. Should I remind people that I partied with Epstein? Is that a good idea or a great idea? I think it might be a great idea. And yet, despite this insane tangent, the media still fell for Trump's act simply because his team dosed his Diet Coke with NyQuil and got him to read a prepared statement pretending to take the crisis seriously. Before the briefing, ABC wrote, "The president is displaying a new tone and a new level of engagement." CNN called it a relatively sober tone, and Bloomberg said Trump reboots virus briefings with warning and a shift in tone. Good Lord. I really think you could duct tape a spatula to a golden retriever's paw and half of the media would say, "Oh my God, that dog's a chef. What's wrong with you guys? How can you keep falling for this? It's been 5 years of this BS, and still, every time President Werewolf over here manages to Novocaine his way through a prepared statement without passing out at the podium, you act like he's a totally different person all of a sudden." And I say President Werewolf, but really, he's more like a reverse werewolf. He terrorizes townspeople all the time, and then he's normal for a couple of hours when there's a full moon. I owe you all an apology for the past 30 days. My behavior has been monstrous. Look, 74-year-olds don't change unless they're characters in a Clint Eastwood movie where a bunch of retired bank robbers go to outer space, even though all they ever really learn is how to have a slightly better relationship with their estranged daughter. Let's say Laura Linney. "You were never there for me. Those bank robberies paid for your fancy college." I didn't want a fancy college. I wanted a father. "I need to go now, Becky. We're robbing Mars." Look, Trump's just going to steal his phone back and tweet some racist nonsense, right? He repeatedly used a racist term for the coronavirus in the briefing. You don't even need to wait until he tweets. He morphed back into the real Trump mid-press conference. Just compare his supposed tone change from his scripted remarks to an off-the-cuff comment he made just minutes later.
It will probably, unfortunately, get worse before it gets better. The virus will disappear. It will disappear.
My God, I'd say he suffers from extreme short-term memory loss, but then again, he aced that cognitive test, so what do I know? It's too bad coronavirus can't be cured by correctly identifying an elephant on a piece of paper. Then Trump would have knocked that out of the park. Of course, the idea that the virus will just magically disappear is deranged, and since the very beginning of his political career, we've known that both Trump and the political movement he leads are deeply, deeply detached from reality. Sometimes that manifests itself in small but bizarre ways, like when he drew with a Sharpie on a hurricane map or claimed God stopped it from raining at his inauguration, even though people in the crowd were literally holding umbrellas. This guy lies about the weather more than your local meteorologist. You told me we're going to have clear skies all weekend, and then I end up wearing a poncho to the beach. Ugh. The last time I listened to Thunder Rains, and it's important to say, this isn't unique to Trump. The modern conservative movement is a paranoid movement obsessed with conspiracy theories. Remember, this is the same political movement that thinks the world scientists all got together and fabricated the climate crisis as part of an elaborate plot to outlaw airplanes and barbecues. Good thing we elected Donald Trump to protect our flights and social gatherings, and now those same lunatics think graffiti and light property damage constitute domestic terrorism. For example, take Acting Secretary of Homeland Security Chad Wolf. You know, Drakkar Noir if it grew up to be a real boy. Pretty sure this dude had a minor role on Entourage as a personal trainer who's friends with Turtle. He looks like a guy who on a first date would tell you he was a commando in a top secret army unit called the Omega Squad, and then you'd get home and Google it and find out Omega Squad is a paintball range 2 towns over. Wolf put out a statement on the administration's decision to send secret police to Portland to snatch protesters off the street and stuff them in unmarked vans, in which DHS uses the phrases violent mob, violent criminals, or violent anarchists a total of 76 times. Is this a press statement or a page from Rorschach's journal? 13-year-old. He's pretty psyched about that joke. It's bad enough to sound like a fascist, but at least crack open a thesaurus. The only time it's permissible to use the phrase violent anarchy that often is when you're reviewing the music of Stomp. Guys, do we need that many trash cans? Maybe one of you could learn guitar? Anytime a government is calling its own citizens violent anarchists should raise alarms. So what did these supposedly violent anarchists do to deserve that name? Well, you'll be shocked to find out it's complete bull.
Chad Wolf, he is the acting Secretary of Homeland Security. To justify what Donald Trump is doing, he tweeted out images of himself viewing graffiti that had been put on buildings in Portland. And the DHS put out a statement pointing to the buildings it said had been graffitied by, quote, violent anarchists. So the mission of the Department of Homeland Security is to deploy secret police to the streets of American City to stop graffiti and some light property damage.
Graffiti. You're going full dictator over some graffiti. What's next? You gonna send in SEAL Team 6 to arrest love-struck teens carving their initials into tree? Okay, he just finished carving the heart shape into the tree. Now he's going for the TLA. Take the shot! Take the shot, Todd! That's right, our government used graffiti to justify sending secret police to an American city to abduct protesters into unmarked vans without telling them who they are, where they're going, or why they've been arrested. But it would be bad enough if what they were doing was using secret police to enforce laws against graffiti. That's already chilling. What they're actually doing is even worse. They're just snatching peaceful protesters off the street. They're kidnapping people and not even telling them what they're being charged with.
Federal law enforcement officers have been using unmarked vehicles to drive around downtown Portland and detain protesters since at least Tuesday. Personal accounts and multiple videos posted online show the officers driving up to people, detaining individuals with no explanation about why they're being arrested, and driving off.
One came from a 29-year-old named Mark Pettibone, who said that when he was abducted, he did not know if the men were even police. He thought they might be far-right extremists. I was terrified, he told the Washington Post. It seemed like it was out of a horror sci-fi, like a Philip K. Dick novel. It was like being preyed upon.
Leave it to Portland to use a literary reference. If this happened anywhere else, people would say it seemed like something out of a movie or at best a YA novel. But in Portland, you get, it's like a Philip K. Dick novel, less in setting, but more in tenor. The later works, of course. And in case you're not a Philip K. Dick fan, that's bad. The dude wrote dystopian science fiction. None of it was ever good. He never wrote a novel called Robots Took Over and gave us candy. When a secret paramilitary force is abducting peaceful protesters in the dark of night without identifying themselves, that means even they know what they're doing is a flagrant abuse of power. And you can tell it's a flagrant abuse of power because they're using shady and irregular tactics to do it. For example, federal officers appear to be using rental cars from Enterprise to snatch protesters. Well, at least we know they were not kidding with their slogan. Did you guys get a deal on kayak? I hope you got the liability insurance, because I'm pretty sure you're going to have a lawsuit on your hands. Man, what a advertisement for Enterprise, by the way. This reminds me of the time in the 80s when the KGB did an ad for Hertz. And now Trump is threatening to send his secret police to other cities, and the rotten husks in the GOP and on Fox News are cheering him on. The president can't be bothered to develop a national strategy for a pandemic that's killed 140,000 Americans, but to defend some statues, he'll send secret police to American cities to abduct protesters. He and his right-wing allies couldn't care less about you. They just want power. If we leave these people in charge of our democracy any longer,
It will disappear.
This has been A Closer Look. So many New Yorkers are turning to City Harvest for help feeding their families, and they need your support now more than ever. If you're watching this online, you can hit the donate button. Stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask. We love you.